I record this not as testimony, nor confession, but as function. Duty demands I leave a trail of words, even if no soul survives to read them. I am Acolyte Severin Malchius, attached to Inquisitor Hestian Vey of the Ordo Malleus. On the 200th day of the siege of Carthago's 9, I saw a thing that should not be. The fortress at the planet's equator was known to the guard as the Warp Citadel. The name had already spread through the regiments like an infection, whispered at night, cursed in the day. Its bulk was visible from orbit, a cathedral of black stone fused with geometry alien to our eyes, its battlements crowned with spires like inverted blades. But when the transport set us down in the desert wastes, one fact struck us harder than the furnace heat. The citadel cast no shadow. I state this with precision. Not that its shadow was thin, or fragmented by the sun's angle, but that no shadow existed at all. Under the glare of two suns, its walls drank the light, swallowing every trace of contrast. The dunes around us glared white. The fortress remained an absence, flat and unchanging, as though unbound by the laws of illumination. The guard troopers spat prayers against witchery. The Astartes of Kill Team Radamanthos, black-armoured giants of the Death Watch, gave no comment, though their helms turned often toward the anomaly. Magos Explorator Datrus of the Adeptus Mechanicus clicked his vox filters in reverence. A fortress without shadow is a fortress already half in the void, he Binharik chanted. Our orders were to enter, survey, and determine whether the structure was of imperial, xenos, or demonic origin. Inquisitor Vey himself did not descend. He watched from orbit, his will projected through us. I resented his absence at the time, but now I envy it. The first sign of resistance was not from the citadel, but from the air. As we advanced across the salt flats, vox links failed in sequence, not with static, but with hymns. Snatches of liturgical chant bled across the channels, as though choir boys sang in the storm. The kill team's chaplain declared it blasphemy and ordered the men to pray louder. One guardsman's lips split with dryness as he recited the litany of protection until blood stained his teeth. At the fortress gates, we saw no hinges, no seams, yet the doors opened to our approach. They yawned inward with a groan like shifting glaciers, revealing a cavernous interior stairwell plunging into darkness. Torches guttered, though no wind touched them. Inside, the temperature dropped instantly, frost crusting the lenses of my rebreather. The citadel breathed. That is no metaphor. We heard it. A slow exhalation issued from the stairwell depths, rolling across our boots as a wave of mist. With each cycle of breath, the walls flexed almost imperceptibly, like lungs clad in stone. A guardsman dared to whisper, "The fortress is alive." The chaplain silenced him with a gauntleted strike, but I had seen the Marine's own hands trembling upon his crozius. We descended. The steps were hewn too precisely to be natural stone. Every riser was the same height, every angle exact. Yet the material was wrong. Not granite, not steel, but a black composite shot through with gold veins that pulsed faintly. I swear by the God Emperor they pulsed, dim at first, then stronger as our torchlight touched them. The further we went, the more I noticed the walls mirrored our motion. When I raised my hand, the veins flickered a beat later, as if mimicking my gesture. When the kill team shifted formation, the stairwell's resonance altered pitch. It was not reflection. It was response. Acolyte's note. At this point in my chronicle, my handwriting grew jagged. My autoscript servitor corrected only fragments. I apologize for lapses. At 73 steps, we halted. A shadow flickered across the stairwell wall. Not ours. It moved with the gait of a man, tall, armed, armored. Yet none among us matched its stride. One Deathwatch Marine swore he recognized its silhouette, a comrade who had perished weeks earlier upon the surface, torn apart by demonic artillery. The guardsmen panicked. Bolters were leveled, Laser guns snapped to charge. But there was nothing there when we shone our beams, nothing, except for the shadow itself, still marching ahead, deeper into the citadel. We pursued. I remember clearly. The shadow did not falter, and we descended faster, driven by the need to overtake it. But though our speed increased, the distance between us did not. It remained always at the bend of the stairwell, always just beyond reach. Finally, the chaplain roared an oath and hurled a purity seal at the figure. The parchment flared in blue flame mid-air, consumed without a trace. The citadel exhaled again, colder than before. We froze, realizing. The shadow had stopped moving. It waited for us. Then the stairwell shuddered, as if with laughter. The air pressed in heavy and all lumen globes guttered at once. For an instant, I swear I saw the shape of a colossal ribcage enclosing the entire stairwell, each bone the size of a tower. The mist thickened. We tasted salt and iron. The magos stammered binharic litanies of protection, but the syllables twisted, broken by static. The shadow lifted one hand, a gesture of welcome. We had no choice but to descend further. Duty demanded it, curiosity demanded it, but above all, dread demanded it. For in our marrow, every one of us already knew. We had stepped into the lungs of something greater, and it was breathing us in. Cliffhanger. At the stairwell's next landing, the mist parted to reveal an archway leading deeper. Beyond it, darkness moved like liquid, writhing against the stone. And from that blackness came a sound like a child's whisper, but speaking each of our names, one after the other. I record this as precisely as I can, though my hand shakes and my servitor's autoscript corrects fewer errors than usual. We had descended 73 steps when the shadow ceased its march, and the stairwell seemed to exhale around us. Yet our descent could not stop. Duty, that iron chain, demanded that we follow into the citadel's depths. Each step carried with it a weight beyond stone, an oppressive awareness that we had become prey of a sentient architecture. The walls changed. Where once black stone had flexed with heartbeat pulses, now the surfaces seemed to breathe independently of us. Gold veins thickened and thinned like arteries, pulsing in patterns that mimicked neural firing. The mechanicus magos datris paused to touch the wall with gloved fingers. His vox filter squealed in protest. When he withdrew, we saw the skin of his palm had blistered, leaving only charred imprint lines upon the living stone. "This is not stone," he whispered in binharic, voice trembling. "It is ossified resonance, half alive, half calculation, each pulse a measure, each vein a conduit. Do not touch further, acolytes note. I record this as warning for others who may follow. Do not touch." We moved in formation, kill team Radamanthos led, chaplain chanting prayers of warding, guardsmen spread behind, bolters at the ready. I documented. The further we descended, the more the citadel responded. The floor beneath our boots flexed, subtly rising and falling, as if with slow tidal breaths. Torches guttered, even though there was no draft. Our shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, even though outside, the fortress cast none. At one landing, I noted a curious sigil etched into the stone, a hexagon surrounded by 7 interlacing lines. It was too precise, too symmetrical to be natural. The mago scanned it with auspex, and his eyes widened behind the ocular lenses. "A template," he muttered. "A grid. Mapping. Something." Before we could inquire further, a guardsman reached to trace it. His fingers melted against the wall as if the stone rejected him. Only armor remained, white plates blackened by some internal flame. He screamed, but no sound came. Only the wall absorbed it. The chaplain cursed loudly, striking the wall with his crozius, but the gold veins merely pulsed brighter, more insistently, as though mocking him. We pressed onward. Every corridor beyond this point became a spiral, walls subtly rotating, stairs that had been right angles now arched into impossible geometry. I began to feel déjà vu, as though we had walked these halls before, yet the logs confirmed we had not. Each step was precise, and yet each step moved us nowhere. Then, movement, a twitch in the walls, a flex that was not ours. One of the corridors seemed to breathe faster than the rest. The magos approached, attempting to scan, and the auspex flickered violently, displaying multiple life signatures, ours, but distorted. Names of men already dead appeared beside the readings. The psyker murmured in shock, reciting names she could not have known. Corporal Rask, Private Dellon, Sergeant Uriel, all perished months ago in orbital drops or planetary bombardments. "What manner of blasphemy is this?" the chaplain cried. The shadow moved again, though still unseen. This time it manifested subtly along the walls themselves. A ripple in the veins, a distortion in geometry. When our psyker, Sister Valia, reached to identify the resonance, she screamed, body contorting violently. Her voice doubled, splitting in tone, like an echo she did not control. High Gothic prayers poured from her throat in languages never recorded, syllables that should not exist. We restrained her. The magos studied her convulsions, eyes wide with awe and fear. The citadel records memory, encodes consciousness. She speaks in the voice of the walls themselves. We moved deeper into a vast antechamber, walls lined with hundreds of inlaid sigils and carvings. Names glowed faintly within the veins of the walls. Initially we assumed they were historical, lost soldiers, forgotten citizens, but one by one our own names appeared. Each inscription flickered with light and then dimmed, as if observing us. The chaplain barked prayers, but the sigils did not fade. Acolytes note, the walls are alive, they are aware, they recognize us, they measure us. The air grew thick with frost, breath crystallized in our helmets. The citadel exhaled again, slow and deliberate. Our footsteps left no echo, yet each pulse in the stone synchronized with our heartbeats. I swear the citadel's pulse slowed when we paused, and quickened when we ran. Then came the first real sign of intent. A corridor ahead darkened. One of the faceless shadows emerged, not human, not entirely void, but a shape. It stepped forward, imitating the stride of a marine we lost long ago in orbital bombardment. Guardsmen raised bolters. The magos reached for his taser wand. The figure vanished before they could fire. Only its shadow remained, marching across the stone, independent of any body. The stairwell shuddered. A low vibration shook our boots, resonating through our bones. The faceless shadow lifted an arm, not threatening, but beckoning. A wave of instinct told us to run, yet duty bound us. The chaplain murmured, "We cannot flee." Not yet, the citadel responded to our hesitation. Veins of gold brightened in synchrony, pulsating in rhythmic intensity. The temperature dropped further. Frost rimed our armor. I felt numbness in my fingers. I documented all, knowing that these details might be all that survived should we fail. Finally, we reached the next landing. Beyond the archway, darkness churned, a low, liquid movement in the black, and from it came a sound, soft, childlike, whispering, but clear. Our names, one after the other. The citadel called. We would have to answer. Cliffhanger. The stairs led into darkness that seemed to breathe in rhythm with our own hearts, and from the black, our names whispered again. Closer now, insistent, impossible. We stepped through the archway and entered a vast chamber, ceiling lost in shadow, walls impossibly tall. The citadel's pulse echoed through the floor and walls, a deep resonance that pressed against our bones. Every breath felt like inhaling frost and iron simultaneously. I record this carefully. Nothing within this place obeyed the laws of physics, biology, or theology as I have known them. The chamber was lined with carvings, thousands of them, each name etched in delicate, precise script and illuminated by veins of gold that pulsed in rhythm with the citadel itself. At first, We assumed these were the honored dead of some forgotten legion or planetary militia. But then the glow shifted. Our names appeared. I stopped. My hand hovered over my laser gun. The rest of the team froze. The glow intensified. One by one, the names of my comrades flickered into existence, like a ledger the citadel had kept before we ever arrived. Chaplain Vorax muttered a prayer, but the syllables came out strained, fragmented. By the Emperor, this is blasphemy. The Mechanicus Magos examined the walls with his auspex, and the readings caused his ocular lenses to smoke faintly. These are life signatures, he whispered, not records. The citadel encodes the very essence of those who enter. It catalogues them. And now, it has catalogued you. The Psyker, Sister Valia, collapsed to her knees. Her eyes rolled back, and she began convulsing. Her voice fractured into two tones simultaneously, one her own, one a deep resonance that vibrated the chamber itself. She spoke in high Gothic phrases, never recorded in the Imperium's lexicon. Words of invocation and condemnation, praising and condemning at once. Acolyte's note. At this point, I noticed something unsettling in the air itself. The temperature dropped suddenly, frost forming on armor and skin. Vox transmissions crackled, not with static but with layered chanting, as if a choir of the long-dead spoke through the equipment. We advanced cautiously. The walls appeared to watch us. Not metaphorically. The gold veins flexed and shimmered when we looked at them directly, and some inscriptions appeared to shift subtly, as if breathing. Every time we tried to record or photograph, the images corrupted themselves, warped by some unseen algorithm embedded in the structure. Then the first of the small horrors emerged. One guardsman reached out to trace the carvings, perhaps thinking it a protective ritual. His hand seared instantly. Flesh burned away, leaving only armored bones behind. The chaplain struck the wall with his crozius, but it flexed like rubber, mocking his wrath. The magos muttered Binharic invocations, scanning frantically for a hazard. He noted that the walls were more than material. They were living computational grids, pulsing with encoded life, memory, and perhaps consciousness. The chamber seemed infinite. Corridors extended beyond sight, defying logical geometry. Light from our torches bent strangely, forming arcs and patterns that had no source. Our footsteps echoed, but echoes did not match the rhythm of our walking. Occasionally, the shadow from Chapter 2 reappeared, unattached to any body, marching through the walls, observing. Sister Valia's convulsions grew violent. She spoke again, and I documented every word. The choir is incomplete. The last note awaits. The chaplain demanded she cease, striking her with his gauntlet. She did not react as a living being should. Instead, the strike caused a shudder in the walls. The names of the dead flickered violently, and the hexagonal motifs began to shimmer, casting reflections that were impossible in the absence of light sources. We pressed forward, deeper into the chamber. The air itself was thick, almost viscous, clinging to lungs like resin. Every inhale was laborious. Every exhale felt inadequate. As we walked, the names continued to appear, not random, but in a sequence. Some were soldiers long dead, others civilians whose deaths were unrecorded. And then, unmistakably, the first name to appear was mine. The date next to it caused a collective halt in our march. Tomorrow. No one spoke. No one breathed. We understood in unspoken consensus. The citadel did not merely record. It predicted, inscribed, and perhaps orchestrated fate. The faceless shadow emerged again. It mimicked a body none of us recognized, yet moved with precise familiarity of a lost comrade. It paused before me, hand raised in a gesture I could not interpret. Fear rooted me to the spot, yet duty, ritual, and stubborn defiance demanded we continue. The Magos whispered, almost inaudibly, "The citadel writes futures. It is, alive in intent, not mere matter." A sudden tremor rattled the chamber. Dust and small stones fell from the ceiling. The torch flames flickered violently. The veins pulsed in tandem with our heartbeats. Sister Valia stood, voice now a perfect double, hers and the citadel's, chanting in harmony. The pulse quickened. The floor beneath us flexed, responding to the rhythm of her voice, like some great organ of flesh and stone awakening. We stumbled into a smaller hall, a cul-de-sac of impossibly smooth walls. There, we saw the first real horror. One of the bodies catalogued by the citadel, half fused with stone, eyes open, mouth silent, staring blankly at us. It was not yet dead, not yet alive, but suspended in some perverse stasis, a detail that made my blood chill. The body had my face. The chaplain's prayers became frantic. The guardsmen were silent, weapons shaking in hand. The Magos' auspex recorded every heartbeat, every pulse in the walls, every fluctuation in the inscriptions. He whispered, "We have become notes in its choir." And the choir demands completion. I swallowed and recorded, knowing that every word might be my last. Then the whispering began again, not voices, not chanting, a sound like fingernails over bone, soft and deliberate, calling our names. One by one, repeating, as though testing recognition. I realized, with cold inevitability, that the citadel was not merely a structure, not merely alive. It was aware of us, intimately, and it hungered for us to participate in its ritual. Cliffhanger. At the chamber's far end, a doorway shaped like a ribcage opened slowly, revealing darkness denser than the shadows behind our eyes. And from that darkness came movement, liquid and serpentine, coiling as if alive, preparing to welcome the choir's next participant. The darkness beyond the rib-shaped doorway pulsed as though alive. It was not empty space, nor mere shadow. The air itself throbbed, vibrating with resonance that sank into bone and marrow. I record this with care, for these are not mere hallucinations. The kill team witnessed it, each in their own manner, and none would survive unchanged. Sister Valia rose from her knees, voice fractured into twin tones. Hers, and another deeper, resonating tone that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The pulse of the citadel quickened, matching the cadence of her dual voice. The veins in the walls glimmered gold and black, a lattice that defied geometry, fracturing in ways our minds could not reconcile. I documented the first auditory anomaly, the choir. It was not music, not as the Emperor's hymns are music. It was a resonance, a lattice of sound and vibration that carried meaning outside the scope of mortal perception. Guardsmen froze in place, hands clutching lasguns that trembled against the invisible pressure. Acolyte notes from previous descent warned of sensory overload, but nothing prepared us for this. The Magos examined his auspex, eyes widening as readings flooded his ocular lenses. Life signatures flickered erratically, not just ours, but those of countless individuals who had died on Carthago's 9 and elsewhere. They are imprinted. The citadel has collected more than memory. It stores essence, he murmured. The choir is fed by life itself. We advanced, compelled both by duty and terror. The walls pulsed in rhythm with Valia's voice, echoing the chant throughout the chamber, bending corridors in impossible curves. Frost rhymed our armor, and we drew breath with difficulty. Every inhale seemed to draw shards of reality into our lungs. Every exhale threatened to shatter consciousness. Guardsmen whispered of hearing voices not their own. Mothers calling names long forgotten. Fathers warning of danger. Children laughing, crying. The chaplain shouted for focus, yet his own words fractured mid-syllable, distorted by resonance. Even Magos Datrus's mechanical augmentations faltered, struggling to reconcile readings that defied the laws of physics. Acolyte's note. I recorded every tremor, pulse, and flicker in the walls. They are alive. They are listening. The chamber expanded as we moved. There was no ceiling. Darkness rose, thick and viscous. Veins of gold spread across the black walls, forming new patterns in real time. Sister Valia began chanting a secondary line, counterpoint to her original dual voice. The sound was harmonically impossible, yet perfectly synchronous. The floor beneath us flexed in response. Then we saw them. Skeletal remains fused into the walls themselves. Limbs half emerged, faces pressed in eternal silent song. They twitched with every note Valia produced. Some bore the faces of our comrades, long thought dead. The chaplain recoiled, raising his crozius. "The Emperor preserve us," he muttered, voice trembling. Valia's voice changed suddenly. No longer two tones, but a chorus, a multitude speaking through her. She convulsed, body bending in angles no human frame should tolerate. The citadel responded. Walls undulated as if breathing, veins flaring brighter with each pulse. The air shimmered, and shadows moved independently, racing across the surface to trace patterns in the gold lattice. The faceless shadow returned, moving across the chamber's far wall, mirroring Valia's movements. It raised its hand toward us, and the gold veins shimmered like liquid, forming inscriptions that I cannot fully describe. One line of Binharic appeared, translating roughly to, "The choir is incomplete. Completion demands the last." The chaplain attempted exorcism rites, but the words twisted mid-air, warped by resonance. The veins in the walls pulsed in counter-rhythm, and for the first time I understood. The citadel was in control. It conducted the choir. We were the notes. Guardsmen faltered. One vomited black ichor, claiming that the floor had rejected him. Another screamed as his shadow stretched unnaturally, bending to touch the walls. The magos recalibrated his auspex frantically. Life signatures were being rewritten in real time, fused with wall and stone. He murmured, "They are alive in the lattice, and we are becoming part of it." We pressed forward, drawn toward the source. At the center of the chamber, the floor opened into a circular pit. The walls spiraled around it, lined with the twisted remains of those consumed, faces frozen in silent agony. The pulse of the citadel was strongest here, hammering in rhythm with our hearts. Sister Valia began chanting the final line. The walls responded, gold veins flaring in harmonic convergence. A low hum vibrated through our bones. The air shimmered, and I swear I saw the chamber itself undulate, as if the citadel were inhaling, holding, and preparing to exhale us into oblivion. Acolyte's note. At this point, I realized the true danger. This was no mere storage of souls. The citadel transformed them, encoded them into the choir, feeding on life to sing across space and time. And it wanted us to join. The faceless shadow stepped closer, no longer mimicking the dead, but forming a singular, distorted figure, arms raised in invitation. Valia's voice rose to a crescendo, and the pulse in the veins synchronized with every heartbeat in the chamber. One by one, we began to feel the compulsion, an irresistible draw toward the pit. The chaplain cried out, striking the air with his crozius, but even he faltered. The choir's resonance pressed into our minds, a multi-layered dirge that bypassed speech and drilled directly into cognition. Then, a sound that no human should hear, the voice of the citadel itself, a whisper, yet all-encompassing. One name, my name. I froze. It knew me, and it was calling. Cliffhanger. The pit's darkness writhed, alive with unspeakable intent, and the choir's resonance shifted into a new, horrifying harmony. Sister Valia's body arched unnaturally, eyes glowing with golden light, as if the citadel itself was speaking through her. The last note of the choir demanded the next participant, and I knew it was me. We survived the hollow choir, or at least, we continued moving. I do not use the word survived lightly. By the time we left that chamber, our senses were frayed, our wills strained to the breaking point. The citadel's pulse lingered in our bones, vibrating beneath armor and flesh alike. Each step forward was an act of both duty and terror. The corridor ahead descended further, lined with gold-veined walls that seemed to thicken and contract like living sinew. Frost clung to our armor, breath crystallized and shattered mid-air. A low hum pervaded every surface, vibrating through our ears and skulls, bypassing vox communication entirely. When the Magos explorator Datris attempted to initiate a vox scan, the equipment failed entirely. Screens blank, signal absent. Acolyte's note. All vox communication failed here. Not static, not interference, erasure. The kill team attempted standard protocols, repeated transmissions, alternate frequencies, psychic amplification. Nothing. Even our manual signals, the bell of a helmet, the rattle of armor, seemed dampened, swallowed by the citadel itself. A guardsman whispered, "We're isolated." Isolation is an understatement. The citadel did not merely block communication, it consumed it. Our words, commands, prayers, even thoughts seemed to scatter in the heavy air, absorbed into the wall's veins, twisted and recorded. I swear I heard my own voice calling back to me in the rhythm of the gold lattice, a sinister echo of command, slightly altered, distorted. We advanced slowly. The corridor twisted in impossible angles, and our spatial sense warped with every step. Stairs rose where gravity insisted they fall. Walls bent with angles that should not exist. Yet we understood, vaguely, that each distortion was deliberate, responsive to our presence. The citadel observed. It measured. It judged. Then the first disappearance. Corporal Rask, one of the more disciplined guardsmen, stepped forward to illuminate a junction, and his silhouette shimmered unnaturally against the gold veins. I blinked, and he was gone. No scream, no trace. Only the faint residual echo of footsteps, growing fainter until the floor itself seemed to absorb the sound entirely. We called for him on Vox. Nothing. We retraced our steps. Nothing. Only the walls pulsed, veins bright with rhythmic approval. The Magos recorded the incident, eyes wide behind ocular lenses. The citadel catalogues not only essence, but presence. It can selectively remove individuals from observable reality. The chaplain's Crozius struck the wall, producing a resonance rather than sound. He muttered prayers of absolution, hands trembling, voice breaking. By the Emperor, we are unmade here, one by one. As we pressed onward, the citadel's distortions intensified. Corridors twisted into Mobius-like loops. Walls bent at impossible angles. Shadows moved independently. Our own shadows, dim and inconsistent, refused to match our positions, stretching along corridors only to vanish, leaving no trace of alignment with our bodies. Acolyte's note. These anomalies are not illusions. They are active alterations of reality. The citadel rewrites the rules. Sister Valia remained a conduit for the choir. Her body convulsed intermittently, voice rising in two overlapping frequencies, echoing in the walls, even in the corridors we had yet to enter. Each note vibrated through the floor, pulse resonating against our chest plates, armor, and skulls. The Magos attempted psychic shielding. It failed. Even my own meditation, intended to stabilize observation, faltered. A second disappearance occurred moments later. Guardsman Dellen approached the walls, eyes drawn to the inscriptions. One hand touched a vein of gold. His lips moved, but no sound emerged. Then he collapsed sideways. When we reached him, his body had vanished. Only the armor remained, eerily empty, resting on the floor as if a corpse had never existed. Panic rose in the kill team. Bolters snapped into firing position. The faceless shadow from previous chambers flickered along the walls again, motionless yet impossibly observant. It raised a hand, and the floor flexed, swallowing the empty armor of Dellen into a ripple of blackness. The Magos' voice was low and urgent. It selects, it catalogues, it assimilates. Vox failure is not random. Each attempt at communication is repurposed as data. We are subjects now. We stumbled into a larger hall, vaulted and endless. The veins pulsed brighter than before, and the air grew viscous, thick with frost and metallic taste. Every inhalation felt like swallowing shards of glass. The chaplain cursed openly, slamming his crozius into the floor and walls. The walls rippled in response, gold veins brightening to a fevered pitch. Sister Valia screamed, her voice fractured into 3 distinct tones now. Hers, the citadel's, and something else, something beyond comprehension. Her body arched at impossible angles. A low rumble resonated from the floor, a warning or perhaps a prelude. The choir's resonance shifted subtly, harmonics bending toward dissonance. The first micro-cliffhanger occurred. One of the guardsmen, Private Uriel, tried to retreat. As his foot left the floor, it vanished, swallowed by the citadel. No scream, no trace. Only the faint shimmer where his presence had been registered, flickering briefly before disappearing entirely. It became clear, the citadel was not only alive, it was sentient, selective, and predatory. The loss of Vox was not mere sabotage, it was the citadel asserting dominance, controlling perception, and removing those it deemed unnecessary, or perhaps necessary for its choir. Acolyte's note. Each disappearance leaves behind a memory echo, sometimes auditory, sometimes visual. We have begun hearing the names of the vanished whispered in corridors, carried on no air, resonating in bone. We had no choice but to press forward. Retreat was impossible. The corridors had begun to loop, stairs bending back upon themselves. The pulse of the citadel increased, synchronized with Valia's voice, echoing the rhythm of our heartbeats. Each step forward felt like a descent deeper into the citadel's lungs. Cliffhanger. As we approached the next junction, the pulse of the walls quickened. From the void of a collapsed corridor came a whisper, clear and chilling. One more note remains. Behind us, the pulse of the citadel shifted. We realized the remaining kill team members were already counted, catalogued. The next disappearance was imminent, and the last note of the choir demanded participation. The corridors had become a labyrinth of impossibility. Stairs looped back on themselves. Walls curved in angles that defied geometry, swallowing our perception of up and down. Frost clung to every surface. Breath crystallized mid-air, shattering as it fell. Each step carried the weight of inevitability, and every heartbeat echoed in resonance with the citadel itself. We entered what the Magos termed the Vault of Echoes, a chamber vast beyond comprehension. The ceiling, lost to darkness, arched like the ribcage of some immense beast. The floor was a mosaic of gold-veined stone, pulsating with the same rhythm that had haunted our descent, the heartbeat of the citadel. The walls were lined with alcoves, each containing the half-fused remains of those catalogued previously. Some were our lost comrades, others entirely unknown, faces twisted in frozen, silent song. Acolyte's note. I record the details for clarity. Each alcove acts as both storage and resonator. The citadel does not merely kill, it preserves essence to sing in its choir. Sister Valia knelt at the center of the chamber, her body arched at impossible angles, voice fractured into multiple overlapping tones, echoing in harmonic impossibility. The kill team watched in silence, frozen by awe and dread. The Magos' Auspex readings fluctuated wildly, unable to reconcile the number of life signatures present. The pulse of the citadel quickened, responding to Valia's song. Gold veins on the walls flared, forming symbols that shifted as though alive. The inscriptions seemed to watch us, adjusting their pattern in real time, mapping our movements and intentions. Even the shadows we cast were distorted, stretching along walls that were geometrically impossible. A sudden tremor ran through the chamber. Dust and fragments fell from the ceiling, and a low guttural hum emerged from the floor itself. The chaplain shouted prayers, but his words fragmented mid-air, twisted by the resonance. It was clear. The citadel rejected conventional exorcism. Guardsmen attempted to retreat, but the corridors behind them had dissolved into shifting voids. The citadel was no longer a building. It was an organism, expanding and contracting around us, dictating space, motion, and perception. Then came the first significant disappearance of the vault. Private Uriel, attempting to maintain line of sight with Sister Vilia, reached out toward an alcove. In an instant, his body disintegrated into a fine black mist absorbed into the wall. His last scream never formed, only a residual pulse of life signature remained, flickering briefly in the auspex before fading entirely. The chaplain cursed openly, slamming his crozius against the floor, creating a pulse that resonated through the gold veins. Some of the alcove-bound remains twitched, responding to the vibration. Sister Vilia screamed in harmonic unison, her voice a conduit for the citadel itself. The magos muttered under breath, "It learns. Each act, each thought, each heartbeat is catalogued and integrated. We are data points, not merely guests I documented every detail." The vault was alive, not metaphorically, not through warp influence alone. The walls, floor, and ceiling flexed as if breathing. Every pulse synchronized with our own heartbeats. Every sound, every whisper, every prayer was consumed and reconstituted. A second disappearance occurred when Sergeant Rask stepped forward, drawn toward a section of the wall where the gold veins had begun to spiral in fractal patterns. He vanished entirely, leaving only empty boots behind. The faceless shadow flickered across the opposite wall, raising its hand in a gesture both commanding and beckoning. The citadel responded to its motion. Alcove-bound remains twisted and writhed in silent chorus. The remaining kill team members were paralyzed. Fear had taken root, but so had compulsion. We were being drawn toward the center of the vault, toward Sister Valia and the converging chorus. Our will resisted, yet the pull was inexorable. The citadel's voice, if such it could be called, emerged in resonance, not through air, not through speech, directly into consciousness. One by one, it spoke our names, each syllable a tendril wrapping around thought. One note repeated, insistent, demanding. The choir was incomplete. Completion required our participation. Acolyte's note, I record this for posterity. This is not metaphor. The citadel operates as composer, conductor, and choir simultaneously. We are instruments, not individuals. The pulse quickened further. The floor flexed in rhythm with Vilia's harmonic chant. The walls formed new alcoves, each glowing with gold veins. Within them were not only the remains of previous victims, but distorted echoes of our own faces, frozen in premonition of death. The chaplain recoiled, shouting, "By the Emperor! This is heresy incarnate." The magos, eyes wide behind ocular lenses, muttered Binharik, "It is rewriting. Rewriting existence itself. Presence, memory, and life are variables. The vault catalogues, manipulates, and enforces. Vox communication fails because the citadel controls resonance itself. Every command, every plea is absorbed and repurposed. We cannot reach the outside. We cannot call for help. We are within its body now." Sister Vilia's chant reached a crescendo. The citadel responded. Alcove-bound remains began to move, twisting and flexing, forming a chorus of silent song. The gold veins flashed in time with the harmonic resonance, illuminating the faces of the missing. Some of those faces were ours, already predicted, already catalogued. I realized then that the vault itself was a trap, not for death, but for integration. Each pulse, each harmonic, each disappearance was feeding the choir. And we were next. Cliffhanger. As we approached the central point of the vault, the pulse intensified. The faceless shadow advanced from the periphery, and the walls began to flex like ribs contracting, narrowing the chamber. Sister Valia's body arched impossibly, eyes glowing with gold, as if the citadel itself prepared to assimilate us into the choir's next composition. The vault of echoes had become a living trap. Each step forward was resistance against inevitability, and yet we pressed on, bound by duty, obsession, and fear. The citadel's pulse had changed. It was no longer a heartbeat. It was a predator stalking prey, each surge of resonance testing our nerves, probing our will, and mapping our essence. The walls twisted and flexed with an intelligence that mocked geometry. Alcoves opened and closed at will, revealing the remains of those catalogued previously. Their frozen faces blinked when unobserved. Gold veins pulsed in fractal complexity, forming spirals that hinted at impossible mathematical structures, alive and observing. Acolyte's note: every pulse carries intent. The citadel is aware of us, cataloguing both thought and motion. It is the hunter. We are the hunted. Sister Vilia led, though she was no longer herself. Her chant had evolved, splitting into 5 harmonics, each resonating with different walls simultaneously. The sound bent reality, creating corridors that did not exist moments before, and closing paths we had taken. The pulse of the citadel followed her voice, as if it were a predator stalking prey through invisible terrain. The first attack occurred within a corridor of shifting angles. Guardsman Helric advanced, drawn by the pulse, and the floor flexed beneath him. Gold veins coiled like snakes, wrapping around his boots. His armor was fused to the stone in seconds, his screams silent as the citadel absorbed him. We could only watch, powerless, as his body became a note in the choir. The chaplain muttered prayers, striking the walls with his crozius. The walls responded, rippling violently, veins brightening with aggressive intensity. Each strike seemed only to awaken the citadel further. It was aware of intention, of strategy, of fear. Each attempt to assert control was catalogued and converted into new patterns of resonance. The mago studied his auspex, attempting to measure the pulse. Readings fluctuated wildly, impossible to stabilize. Life signatures flickered like dying stars, merging with alcove-bound remains, then separating again. He muttered, "It is both predator and environment. Movement is not optional. It is part of its hunting rhythm." The corridor opened into a vast chamber, where walls curved impossibly into themselves. Here, the pulse was strongest. It throbbed through the floor and ceiling, shaking our bones and vibrating the gold veins. The air was thick with frost and metallic taste. Every inhalation carried shards of reality. Acolyte's note: the citadel has begun to preemptively manipulate perception. Shadows move independently, footsteps echo without origin, and our own reflections twist in impossible angles. This is no longer a location. It is a sentient hazard. The faceless shadow emerged again, this time mimicking a figure none of us recognized, yet moving with a familiarity that made the hairs on my neck rise. It raised its hand, and the floor rippled. One by one, alcove-bound remains responded, twisting toward the motion as though drawn by some predatory call. Sister Vilia's chant intensified. Her body bent in angles no human frame should tolerate. 5 harmonics interlaced with the pulse of the citadel. The room seemed to constrict. We understood. The pulse was not merely environmental. It hunted by manipulating space itself, guiding us into its chosen paths. The first micro-cliffhanger occurred when Guardsman Thalen attempted to retreat. The corridor behind him twisted suddenly. Stairs bent impossibly. Walls converged. He vanished before he could step fully backward. Only his armor remained, fused to the stone like a sacrificial token. I noted the correlation. Each disappearance aligned with the citadel's pulse. Its rhythm dictated life and death, movement and stasis. It was no longer a passive observer. It was predatory, calculating, and deliberate. The chaplain shouted orders, but the citadel responded instantly. Veins pulsed violently, and one alcove opened, releasing a black ichor that seemed alive. It formed into a mass that coiled and twisted in the air, reaching toward the remaining kill team members. We fired, bolters cracking, but the projectiles slowed mid-air, absorbed into the veined lattice. The Magos's voice trembled behind ocular lenses. It does not merely hunt bodies, it manipulates substance, perception, and essence. Each pulse feeds its choir. Sister Valia screamed a harmonic that split the chamber into visual echoes. Each echo displayed alternate possibilities of ourselves, some dead, some fused into walls, some in agonized stasis. The citadel was projecting futures and weaving them into our perception. The pulse quickened again, resonating through bone and armor. My own heartbeat synchronized with it. I realized then that the citadel could manipulate cognition, embedding dread and obedience simultaneously. Fear was no longer reaction. It was orchestration. Acolyte's note. I record this as warning. The citadel's pulse is not only environmental, it is intentional. It hunts by controlling perception, manipulating time-space pathways, and preying on cognition. Escape without comprehension is impossible. We reached a landing where the corridor split into 3 impossible paths. Each path pulsed differently, with unique harmonic signatures. The Magos attempted to map the pulse to find a safe path, but every adjustment caused the walls to shift, new veins to flare, and alcove-bound remains to twist in anticipation. Sister Valia's voice rose to a final crescendo. 5 harmonics intertwined with the citadel's predatory pulse. The walls responded in fractal precision, veins flashing brighter than ever. Shadows lengthened and converged, moving toward us in synchrony with the pulse. Cliffhanger. At the center of the landing, a void opened, dense, undulating, alive. The citadel's pulse reached its apex, resonating directly in our minds. From the darkness, a whispering chorus named each remaining kill team member individually, commanding us toward the void. One step forward, and the last note of the choir would claim us. The void at the center of the landing beckoned. It was not darkness, not absence, but something alive in its negation. The citadel's pulse had shifted again, no longer merely predatory. It now manipulated absence itself, erasing what we saw, what we felt, what we believed existed. Every step into the spiral corridor felt like walking into a memory we had never lived, a path simultaneously familiar and impossible. Sister Valia's harmonic chant fractured further. 7 tones now emerged from her body, vibrating through every particle of air, stone, and frost. Her eyes glowed gold, reflecting patterns in the walls that moved independently of geometry. Alcove-bound remains stirred, twitching toward her song. Some of the faces were ours, or what we would become. Acolyte's note. Absence here is not mere vacancy. It is active, predatory, and selective. The citadel unwrites space, leaving gaps in reality that are filled with potential horror. Guardsmen faltered. One reached for a corridor wall to steady himself. His hand sank into the stone as if it were liquid, disappearing with a wet, sucking sound. Only his armored sleeve remained, fused to the lattice of veins. Panic rose. The citadel's pulse quickened in response. It was a hunter, and every heartbeat was a signal of prey in its thrall. The chaplain attempted to impose ritual discipline. Crozier struck the floor in repeated blows, but the impact only reverberated in warped patterns, amplifying the citadel's predatory rhythm. Each pulse from the walls, floor, and ceiling aligned with Valia's 7-fold chant, creating a resonance that overrode all perception. Even my notes trembled on the page. The Magos's Auspex readings fluctuated violently. Life signatures flickered, appearing and vanishing mid-measure. It erases us selectively, he muttered. Presence, memory, essence, gone. Each absence feeds the choir we advanced, despite terror. The corridors spiraled impossibly, expanding and contracting at the citadel's whim. Shadows stretched independently, racing ahead or lagging behind us. We heard whispers, not voices, not commands, but the remnants of the vanished, echoing their own absence. One whisper called my name, yet I knew it belonged to someone who had already been erased. Sister Valia's chant became unbearable, 7 harmonics interlaced with the citadel's pulse. Alcove-bound remains reached out, not to touch, but to pull presence into the lattice. Guardsmen tried to resist. Private Luther faltered, stepping into a gap in the floor that had not existed moments before. He vanished. No scream, no echo. Only the void remained. The faceless shadow flickered along the spiral walls, gesturing as if conducting the citadel itself. Veins flared violently, gold and black fractals dancing in impossible rhythms. We realized the citadel's absence was not passive. It hunted, sculpted, and predicted movement. Our every decision was anticipated and catalogued. Acolyte's note: every erased presence leaves a vacuum that the citadel fills with harmonic resonance. Each pulse of absence is a predatory act, drawing the next into the choir. The chaplain began litanies at a frantic pace, but the words twisted mid-air, becoming part of the harmonic lattice. He struck the floor and walls again, yet the alcoves responded violently, one opening to release ichor-like tendrils. They sought the remaining kill team members with preternatural awareness. The Magos recorded the fluctuations, muttering in Binharic. It is feeding on absence as much as presence. The spiral. It is the algorithm. We are inputs. As we pressed deeper, I noticed a horrifying pattern. Every step forward, a name disappeared from the gold veins. Some were our own. Others belonged to those catalogued previously. With each absence, the pulse intensified, Valia's voice splitting further. 7 harmonics now became 8, then 9, each threading through the citadel's predatory spiral. The first irreversible loss occurred when Sergeant Rask tried to stabilize the team. A floor section flexed beneath him, forming a perfect spiral trap. He screamed as the stone absorbed him entirely. Nothing remained but the echo of a heartbeat in the veins, a final measure in the choir. The remaining members froze. We understood then, return was impossible. The spiral erased not only paths, but any hope of exit. The walls seemed to close around us, spiraling tighter, gold veins forming concentric fractals that pulsed in synchronization with Valia's voice. Shadows danced along the edges, moving in impossible directions, flickering in and out of perception. Every step forward felt simultaneously necessary and suicidal. Acolyte's note: the citadel's predatory pulse now manipulates probability. Decisions are anticipated, presence and absence are wielded as weapons. Survival is irrelevant, participation is inevitable. The chaplain, face pale beneath his helmet, shouted for discipline, but the citadel ignored him. Veins flared violently, then dimmed in sudden absence. Alcove-bound remains reached outward, faces twisting into expressions not of fear, but of active consumption, gazing at us as instruments awaiting their measure in the choir. Sister Valia's chant reached a new apex. 9 harmonics intertwined with the predatory pulse. Gold veins shifted into fractals so complex the Magos could not measure them. Each pulse seemed to stretch reality itself, warping the spiral further. Shadows became semi-solid, coiling toward us like living fingers of absence. Cliffhanger. At the center of the spiral, a vast void opened, black, alive, and undulating. The citadel's predatory pulse resonated directly in our minds, erasing hesitation and replacing it with compulsion. From that darkness emerged a form impossible to describe. Flesh, shadow, and gold, beckoning the last members of the kill team. The spiral demanded its final note, and I knew we were the next measure in the choir. The void at the center of the landing beckoned. It was not darkness, not absence, but something alive in its negation. The citadel's pulse had shifted again, no longer merely predatory. It now manipulated absence itself, erasing what we saw, what we felt, what we believed existed. Every step into the spiral corridor felt like walking into a memory we had never lived, a path simultaneously familiar and impossible. Sister Valia's harmonic chant fractured further. 7 tones now emerged from her body, vibrating through every particle of air, stone, and frost. Her eyes glowed gold, reflecting patterns in the walls that moved independently of geometry. Alcove-bound remains stirred, twitching toward her song. Some of the faces were ours, or what we would become. Acolyte's note. Absence here is not mere vacancy. It is active, predatory, and selective. The citadel unwrites space, leaving gaps in reality that are filled with potential horror. Guardsmen faltered. One reached for a corridor wall to steady himself. His hands sank into the stone as if it were liquid, disappearing with a wet, sucking sound. Only his armored sleeve remained, fused to the lattice of veins. Panic rose. The citadel's pulse quickened in response. It was a hunter, and every heartbeat was a signal of prey in its thrall. The chaplain attempted to impose ritual discipline. Crozius struck the floor in repeated blows, but the impact only reverberated in warped patterns, amplifying the citadel's predatory rhythm. Each pulse from the walls, floor, and ceiling aligned with Vailia's sevenfold chant, creating a resonance that overrode all perception. Even my notes trembled on the page. The Magos's Auspex readings fluctuated violently. Life signatures flickered, appearing and vanishing mid-measure. It erases us selectively, he muttered. Presence, memory, essence, gone. Each absence feeds the choir we advanced, despite terror. The corridors spiraled impossibly, expanding and contracting at the citadel's whim. Shadows stretched independently, racing ahead or lagging behind us. We heard whispers, not voices, not commands, but the remnants of the vanished, echoing their own absence. One whisper called my name, yet I knew it belonged to someone who had already been erased. Sister Vailia's chant became unbearable, 7 harmonics interlaced with the citadel's pulse. Alcove-bound remains reached out, not to touch, but to pull presence into the lattice. Guardsmen tried to resist. Private Luther faltered, stepping into a gap in the floor that had not existed moments before. He vanished. No scream, no echo, only the void remained. The faceless shadow flickered along the spiral walls, gesturing as if conducting the citadel itself. Veins flared violently, gold and black fractals dancing in impossible rhythms. We realized the citadel's absence was not passive. It hunted, sculpted, and predicted movement. Our every decision was anticipated and catalogued. Acolyte's note: every erased presence leaves a vacuum that the citadel fills with harmonic resonance. Each pulse of absence is a predatory act, drawing the next into the choir. The chaplain began litanies at a frantic pace, but the words twisted mid-air, becoming part of the harmonic lattice. He struck the floor and walls again, yet the alcoves responded violently, one opening to release ichor-like tendrils. They sought the remaining kill team members with preternatural awareness. The Magos recorded the fluctuations, muttering in Binharic. It is feeding on absence as much as presence. The spiral. It is the algorithm. We are inputs. As we pressed deeper, I noticed a horrifying pattern. Every step forward, a name disappeared from the gold veins. Some were our own. Others belonged to those catalogued previously. With each absence, the pulse intensified, Vailia's voice splitting further. 7 harmonics now became 8, then 9, each threading through the citadel's predatory spiral. The first irreversible loss occurred when Sergeant Rask tried to stabilize the team. A floor section flexed beneath him, forming a perfect spiral trap. He screamed as the stone absorbed him entirely. Nothing remained but the echo of a heartbeat in the veins, a final measure in the choir. The remaining members froze. We understood then. Return was impossible. The spiral erased not only paths, but any hope of exit. The walls seemed to close around us, spiraling tighter, gold veins forming concentric fractals that pulsed in synchronization with Vailia's voice. Shadows danced along the edges, moving in impossible directions, flickering in and out of perception. Every step forward felt simultaneously necessary and suicidal. Acolyte's note: the citadel's predatory pulse now manipulates probability. Decisions are anticipated. Presence and absence are wielded as weapons. Survival is irrelevant. Participation is inevitable. The chaplain, face pale beneath his helmet, shouted for discipline, but the citadel ignored him. Veins flared violently, then dimmed in sudden absence. Alcove-bound remains reached outward, faces twisting into expressions not of fear, but of active consumption, gazing at us as instruments awaiting their measure in the choir. Sister Valia's chant reached a new apex. 9 harmonics intertwined with the predatory pulse. Gold veins shifted into fractals so complex the magos could not measure them. Each pulse seemed to stretch reality itself, warping the spiral further. Shadows became semi-solid, coiling toward us like living fingers of absence. Cliffhanger. At the center of the spiral, a vast void opened, black, alive, and undulating. The citadel's predatory pulse resonated directly in our minds, erasing hesitation and replacing it with compulsion. From that darkness emerged a form impossible to describe: flesh, shadow, and gold, beckoning the last members of the kill team. The spiral demanded its final note, and I knew we were the next measure in the choir. The spiral's void loomed before us, its darkness alive in ways that defied both physics and perception. The citadel's pulse had become a fractal predator, its rhythm no longer linear, but splintered, multiplied, fractured across multiple dimensions of reality. Each heartbeat, each harmonic from Sister Valia's voice, propagated through the walls, floor, and ceiling, splitting into divergent resonances that collided unpredictably in the chamber. Acolyte's note: the citadel no longer operates as a singular organism. Its resonance fractures perception and presence, creating multiple simultaneous realities, each governed by the same predatory pulse. Sister Valia's chant now fractured into 11 distinct harmonics, her body contorting in impossible angles, limbs bending as if shaped by unseen hands. Her eyes, gold and luminous, reflected patterns across the walls that shifted faster than ocular tracking could register. The kill team was both present and absent in these reflections, sometimes mirrored correctly, sometimes displaced, sometimes duplicated in horrifying multiplicities. Private Eland tried to stabilize himself against a wall. It flexed, contracting toward him like sinew, veins flaring in response to his touch. His body vibrated violently. When he called out, his voice split, echoing across multiple corridors simultaneously, dissonant and overwhelming. The citadel absorbed each vocal fragment, feeding them into the harmonic lattice. The chaplain, his Crozius trembling, attempted exorcism rites. Each word fractured mid-air, scattering across the chamber and harmonizing with Valia's 11-fold chant. Alcove-bound remains stirred violently, responding to the fractured resonance, faces twisting and merging in grotesque harmonic convergence. The Magos' aspects read erratically, unable to track life signatures. Some kill team members appeared duplicated across the chamber, others seemed absent entirely. "It fractures perception and reality simultaneously," he muttered. "The citadel is not only predatory, it is rewriting causality itself." We advanced despite the terror, moving through corridors that split and rejoined unpredictably. Shadows twisted independently, often leading us toward new threats. Some corridors led to dead ends that were simultaneously openings. Every step was guided by the citadel's fractured pulse. Every hesitation risked immediate disappearance. Acolyte's note: presence and absence are now indistinguishable. Time is fractured. Each kill team member is simultaneously observed, catalogued, and threatened across multiple resonances. Guardsmen began disappearing without warning. Private Thalen stepped into a corridor where the floor shimmered with black void. In an instant, he was gone, vanished, leaving only a faint residual pulse in the auspex. Sister Valia's voice rose in harmonic reaction, and the walls flexed violently. Veins pulsed in counter-rhythm, illuminating alcoves that contained the warped forms of previous victims. The faceless shadow appeared again, now simultaneously in multiple locations along the spiral. It gestured, and the walls responded with aggressive undulations. Alcove-bound remains reached outward in mirrored motion, twisting and merging into grotesque choruses of absence. We were no longer moving through space. We were moving through the citadel's harmonic intent. The chaplain shouted orders, but the fractured resonance rendered comprehension nearly impossible. We could perceive his voice in dozens of overlapping harmonics, each distorted and accelerated differently. Attempting to respond was useless. The citadel had absorbed our attempts into the lattice. Acolytes note: the harmonic fracture is actively predictive. Each thought, each motion, each attempt to escape is catalogued and used to generate the next environmental hazard. Survival depends on alignment with the citadel's intent, not conventional tactics. I observed a terrifying pattern. The citadel's resonance amplified fear and indecision, projecting future possibilities directly into perception. One corridor appeared to be safe, yet simultaneously displayed duplicates where failure was inevitable. Another corridor projected repeated vanishings, yet walking into it proved survivable, temporarily. The environment itself was a weapon, and it knew us better than we knew ourselves. Sister Valia's body convulsed violently as 11 harmonics merged into a crescendo. Alcove-bound remains surged forward, coiling around warped corridors like living threads of absence. One by one, remaining guardsmen faltered. Private Kellen stepped into a section of floor that shimmered and vanished. Only his armor remained fused to the lattice. The chaplain cried out, striking the walls in defiance, but the impact only intensified the citadel's fractured resonance. Veins brightened, alcoves twisted, and the shadows multiplied. The faceless figure moved closer in one harmonic, then another, simultaneously observing and influencing each kill team member. Acolytes note: the citadel's fractured pulse now targets cognition. The harmonic lattice manipulates perception, memory, and anticipation. Decisions are predicated by the environment. Autonomy is irrelevant. The pulse intensified. The void at the spiral's center seemed to grow, stretching into multiple overlapping spaces. Shadows, veins, and alcove-bound remains converged in harmonic convergence, creating impossible geometries of predation. Sister Valia's voice became unbearable, a cacophony that tore at bone and mind simultaneously. Cliffhanger. As we approached the next junction, the faceless shadow's gestures aligned the fractured pulse into a perfect predatory rhythm. The citadel now displayed our final fates in multiple harmonics simultaneously. Some would vanish immediately, some would be catalogued, and some would become instruments in the choir for eternity. The harmonic lattice converged on the remaining kill team members, and I knew the next measure would be irreversible. The spiral corridor had become a crucible of impossibility. Every wall, every floor tile, every gold vein pulsed with the citadel's fractured intent. Sister Valia's 11-fold harmonic chant reverberated through every molecule of the chamber, weaving with the citadel's predatory pulse to form a lattice of absolute control. Reality no longer obeyed. Movement, perception, and even thought were guided by the citadel's predatory will. Acolytes note: observation is now impossible without participation. Presence itself is a variable manipulated by harmonic resonance. Guardsmen were faltering at an exponential rate. Private Eland had disappeared while attempting to stabilize against the shifting wall. His absence resonated through the corridor, a pulse that reinforced the citadel's control. Each remaining member felt themselves catalogued, measured, and aligned to harmonic vectors we could neither perceive nor resist. The chaplain struck the walls repeatedly, Crozius cracking the stone lattice. Each impact amplified Valia's harmonics, reinforcing the citadel's harmonic network. Alcove-bound remains twitched, eyes glowing, faces frozen in eternal song. One reached outward, sinew stretching impossibly, grasping at the air around us with predatory intent. The faceless shadow manifested again, not as one entity, but as multiple projections across the spiral corridors. Each gesture recalibrated the citadel's pulse. Each movement predicted, measured, and anticipated our own, bending space and time in response. We were no longer agents. We were resonance inputs, instruments in the citadel's choir. Acolytes note, the harmonic convergence has transitioned from environmental hazard to active predation. It manipulates probability, cognition, and physical presence simultaneously. Resistance is anticipated, nullified, and repurposed. We advanced toward the center of the convergence, compelled by a force we could not name. Corridors looped in non-Euclidean configurations, leading to junctions that existed in impossible angles. Shadows moved independently, coiling along walls, across ceilings, and beneath floors. The citadel's pulse synchronized with Valia's voice, reinforcing the predatory lattice. The Magos's auspex failed entirely. Life signatures flickered in fractal patterns, duplicates overlaying absences, generating readings that contradicted one another. He muttered, "It is no longer a singular predator. It is a network of intent, fractal, sentient, and absolute. Each of us is already catalogued. Our choices exist only to feed its harmonic structure." Sister Vialia's body arched violently. 11 harmonics became 13, interweaving with the citadel's pulse. Alcove-bound remains surged from walls, writhing like threads of absence and presence. Some faces were ours, some were unknown, distorted in the citadel's infinite composition. Guardsmen faltered. One reached a floor segment that shimmered in black void. In an instant, he was gone. Only his armor remained, fused to the lattice. Shadows lengthened and merged, coiling in predatory alignment with the citadel's pulse. Each harmonic reinforced absence, predicting the next act of disappearance. The chaplain shouted litanies, attempting to impose order. The walls flexed violently in response, veins flaring as if in mockery. Alcoves opened, releasing ichor-like tendrils that lashed at the remaining kill team members. Bolter fire slowed mid-air, absorbed into the lattice. Attempts at resistance were anticipated and neutralized. Acolytes note, harmonics now govern both spatial and cognitive probability. Each movement is preordained, each hesitation catalogued, each fear amplified. Survival is contingent upon alignment with the citadel's intent. We reached a landing where multiple corridors converged. The citadel's pulse fractured into simultaneous predatory streams. Shadows, veins, and alcove-bound remains moved in perfect synchronization, a predator operating across multiple dimensions of resonance. Sister Valia's body contorted violently, harmonics interweaving with the pulse, amplifying the citadel's predatory control. The first full warp corruption manifested. Private Kellen's body convulsed violently, sinew twisting into impossible forms. Flesh merged with gold veins protruding from the floor. His screams fractured into multiple harmonics, feeding directly into the citadel's lattice. The remaining guardsmen were paralyzed by the sheer horror of witnessing one of their own integrated into the harmonic structure. The Magos recorded frantic notes. The citadel was not merely cataloguing life, it was assimilating essence, fusing biology and perception into the harmonic network. Presence, memory, and physical form were no longer separable. The citadel consumed all three to extend the choir. Acolytes note, assimilation of organic matter is now active. The harmonic lattice converts life, thought, and fear into predatory resonance. All remaining kill team members are targets. Sister Valia's voice reached the apex of the 13-fold harmonic. Veins along the walls flared to blinding brightness, illuminating alcove-bound remains, writhing in anticipation. Shadows lengthened, coiling into grotesque forms. The faceless shadow advanced from multiple vectors, orchestrating the predatory pulse with surgical precision. We realized then, escape was impossible. The citadel had orchestrated the convergence to remove autonomy entirely. We were instruments, one final measure in an eternal, predatory composition. Cliffhanger. At the heart of the convergence, the void opened, a swirling nexus of black and gold, alive with predatory intent. The citadel's harmonic pulse resonated directly into our minds, fracturing will and perception simultaneously. From that void emerged forms impossible to describe: flesh, shadow, and gold intertwined, beckoning the remaining kill team members toward assimilation. The choir demanded its final notes, and we were powerless to resist. The void at the center of the convergence loomed like a predator awakened, alive with undulating black and gold resonance. The citadel's pulse had fractured beyond measure, each harmonic thread weaving through space, thought, and flesh simultaneously. Every step toward the void was measured, catalogued, and anticipated. We were no longer agents. We were instruments in the citadel's eternal composition. Acolyte's note: the citadel no longer distinguishes between life and absence. All that exists is harmonic resonance, predation, and assimilation. Sister Valia's body had become a conduit. 13 harmonics erupted from her frame, each threading through the alcoves, the gold veins, and the shadows. Alcove-bound remains writhed in anticipation, faces frozen in agony and ecstasy simultaneously. One of the remaining guardsmen, Private Luther, faltered, staring at the lattice of veins that now moved like sinew across the walls. A sudden pulse struck our minds, simultaneous and absolute. The chaplain's litanies shattered mid-air, twisting into harmonic echoes, feeding the citadel. Shadows on the walls elongated, coiling into grotesque forms that seemed simultaneously animate and inorganic. Each pulse threatened not only the body, but the mind, and we realized that resistance was already anticipated and neutralized. The Magos's ocular lenses flickered erratically. Arspec's readings collapsed into incomprehensible patterns. "It is no longer reactive," he muttered, voice trembling. "It is proactive, predatory, and absolute." The harmonic lattice assimilates thought, perception, and physical matter into the choir. Resistance is already part of the composition. Private Kellen, still trembling after his partial assimilation in the previous chamber, screamed as the lattice sought to draw him fully into the void. His sinew fused further with the gold veins protruding from the floor, flesh and cognition folding into harmonic threads. Each scream fragmented into multiple harmonics, feeding the citadel and simultaneously displaying possible futures, some in which we survived, some in which we did not. Acolyte's note: the choir's embrace is absolute. Each pulse folds existence into itself. Life, absence, memory, and flesh are all material for harmonic predation. Sister Valia's eyes glowed with unbearable light. 13 harmonics merged with the citadel's predatory pulse, creating an overlay of multiple realities. Alcove-bound remains began to surge outward, sinew and gold intertwining to form living tendrils. Each movement was predicated on the lattice's anticipation, leaving the remaining kill team members no room to maneuver. The chaplain attempted to strike the lattice with the crozius, his voice shouting litanies, but each strike only reinforced the citadel's control. Veins flared brighter, shadows coiled faster, and the harmonic lattice integrated his presence into the choir. Acolyte's note: active assimilation occurs via both physical and cognitive interaction. Litanies, prayers, or attacks are absorbed into the harmonic structure. Only alignment with the citadel's intent offers temporary survival. I observed that even my own thoughts were being manipulated. Fear, hesitation, calculation, all were catalogued and reflected back as visual distortions in the walls. Shadows twisted into forms representing our probable actions, predicting each step. The citadel no longer merely hunted. It orchestrated, measured, and composed. Private Luther collapsed fully into the harmonic threads, his flesh twisted, sinew intertwining with gold veins. His screams became multiple voices, feeding directly into the lattice. Alcove-bound remains twitched in response, reaching toward us as instruments awaiting the next notes. Sister Valia's chant shifted again. 13 harmonics split into 15, each threading through the void, the walls, and the shadows. The faceless shadow manifested from multiple vectors, gesturing in predatory choreography. We realized with a cold dread that the citadel had planned this convergence from the beginning. The harmonic lattice was not reactionary, it was preordained, and we were already part of the final measure. Acolyte's note: presence is now entirely subordinate to harmonic resonance. Every heartbeat, breath, and thought is catalogued. The citadel's intent is absolute. The void pulsed violently, expanding in response to Valia's harmonics. Alcove-bound remains surged toward the center, writhing in anticipation of assimilation. Shadows coiled around the remaining kill team members, fusing perception with reality, leaving only predatory intent and unavoidable destiny. The chaplain's final effort involved a desperate invocation, striking the walls with rhythm intended to disrupt the lattice. Instead, the citadel responded by fracturing the harmonic resonance further, producing mirrored threads of himself and the kill team, each caught in the lattice. We were both present and absent, alive and catalogued, moving and still, simultaneously. Acolyte's note: resistance is now part of the harmonic composition. The citadel transforms opposition into enhancement of its predatory structure. Sister Valia's final harmonic split and merged into the citadel's void. Shadows and veins surged together, a predatory symphony consuming reality, perception, and memory. My own heartbeat synchronized to the citadel's pulse. The remaining guardsmen, including the chaplain, faltered, drawn into the choir's embrace. Cliffhanger. As the harmonic convergence reached apex, the void opened fully, revealing a form of the citadel itself, a creature of flesh, gold, shadow, and absence, simultaneously predatory and divine. It beckoned the last measure of the kill team. Our presence, thought, and flesh were already part of its composition. And I realized, with unavoidable horror, that the choir's embrace was irreversible. The citadel's void now dominated all perception. The harmonic lattice had consumed our understanding of space, time, and self. Walls pulsed with gold and black veins, twisting into impossible geometries. Shadows moved independently, coiling, merging, fracturing. Sister Valia's body had become fully a conduit, her 15 harmonics synchronizing with the citadel's predatory pulse. We were no longer agents, we were instruments poised for the final note. Acolyte's note: resistance is catalogued, measured, and converted into harmonic enhancement. Autonomy is impossible. Presence is subordinate to predatory intent. Private Luther's assimilation was complete. Flesh, sinew, cognition, and memory had merged into the lattice. He no longer existed as an individual. He had become a node in the choir, a harmonic vector feeding the citadel. Shadows twisted, responding to his integration, coiling and pulsing with a predatory awareness beyond comprehension. The chaplain faltered. Crozius raised. Litanies muttered in desperation, but the harmonic lattice absorbed each syllable. Veins along the walls brightened, and alcove-bound remains surged toward us, twisting in anticipation. The citadel's pulse synchronized perfectly with Sister Valia's 15-fold harmonics. The void expanded, a living nexus of predatory resonance. Acolyte's note: harmonic convergence has reached apex. The citadel actively manipulates perception, cognition, flesh, and absence. All present are instruments in the final measure. Survival depends on alignment with the harmonic intent, though outcome is predetermined. I realized, as my own heartbeat synchronized with the pulse, that each kill team member's fear, hesitation, and movement was being orchestrated into a predatory composition. The citadel was not only predatory, it was authoritative. dictating who would survive, who would be catalogued, and who would be assimilated entirely. Private Kellen convulsed violently as sinew fused further with gold veins. His screams fractured into multiple harmonics, feeding directly into the citadel's lattice. Alcove-bound remains writhed in synchronization, reaching for us as instruments awaiting the next note. The harmonic pulse was no longer abstract. It was tangible, invasive, and inevitable. Sister Vilia's voice shattered into 17 harmonics, threading through walls, void, and shadows. The faceless shadow appeared simultaneously in multiple locations, orchestrating predation with surgical precision. Each of our steps, each tremor, each blink was anticipated and catalogued. There was no room for hesitation, no possibility of evasion. The chaplain attempted one last ritual, striking the lattice in defiance. The impact amplified the harmonic lattice further. Veins flared violently, shadows lengthened, alcove-bound remains surged. Each act of resistance became a vector in the citadel's predatory network. Resistance had been absorbed, inverted, and weaponized. Acolyte's note: presence, absence, and cognitive intent are now fully integrated into the harmonic structure. The citadel no longer hunts, it performs predation. Every heartbeat, breath, and thought becomes part of the final composition. The remaining guardsmen, paralyzed by terror, were drawn toward the void. Alcove-bound remains twisted, merging with gold veins to form conduits into the citadel's core. Each movement reinforced the predatory pulse. The citadel's intent was absolute: assimilation or erasure. I observed, helpless, as the harmonic lattice integrated Private Kellen fully. Flesh and sinew became threads in the choir. Cognition folded into the predatory structure. His presence, absence, and memory were simultaneously consumed and repurposed as harmonic input. The citadel's void expanded, pulsing in rhythm with Sister Valia's voice, shadows, veins, and my own terrified heartbeat. Acolyte's note: integration into the harmonic lattice is irreversible. Assimilation consumes body, mind, and memory. Presence is rewritten as predatory resonance. The faceless shadow gestured. The void pulsed in anticipation. The remaining kill team members were drawn forward, steps synchronized to the predatory lattice. The citadel now fully orchestrated the final measure, combining spatial, cognitive, and temporal manipulation to ensure that all movement, thought, and resistance contributed to its choir. Sister Valia screamed a harmonic that split reality itself. Alcove-bound remains surged, shadows coiled, and veins pulsed with blinding intensity. My own heartbeat synchronized completely. I could feel the citadel's intent threading through sinew, bone, and mind. We were instruments, no longer conscious actors. The final note was imminent. The void expanded fully, revealing the citadel's true form, a monstrous synthesis of flesh, shadow, and gold veins, simultaneously predatory, divine, and incomprehensible. It reached toward us with impossible limbs, sinew and shadow twisting in harmonic resonance. Our steps carried us forward, unable to resist. The harmonic pulse was absolute. Acolyte's note: the choir's final measure has begun. Survival is no longer an option. Presence, thought, and flesh are instruments in the citadel's composition. Resistance has been converted to predatory enhancement. Cliffhanger. As the harmonic convergence reached apex, the citadel's void consumed the last kill team members. Flesh, sinew, and memory integrated fully into the choir. Shadows, veins, and harmonic threads coiled into the final composition. I realized, with inescapable horror, that my own presence was the next measure, and the citadel's predatory pulse had already begun to weave me into the eternal choir. The citadel's void had consumed all sense of linear space. Shadows, veins, and alcove-bound remains merged into a single predatory network, pulsating with the final measure of harmonic resonance. Every heartbeat, Every breath, every thought was catalogued and integrated into the choir. I was no longer an observer. I was becoming both instrument and measure. Acolyte's note: autonomy is obsolete. Presence, absence, and cognition are fully integrated into the harmonic lattice. Resistance is catalogued, inverted, and amplified as predatory resonance. Sister Valia's body now emitted 19 harmonics. Her voice fractured reality, each thread threading through void, shadow, and gold veins. Alcove-bound remains writhed in anticipation, merging with veins that pulsed with predatory intelligence. The remaining kill team members had been consumed, flesh, sinew, and cognition fully integrated into the citadel. Only I remained, every fiber of my being vibrating in anticipation of assimilation. The faceless shadow appeared simultaneously across multiple harmonic vectors, orchestrating predation with perfect precision. Its gestures aligned the citadel's pulse, dictating every motion, thought, and perception. I felt myself becoming both predator and prey, both observer and observed. The choir's embrace was absolute. Acolyte's note: the harmonic lattice now manipulates perception of self. Identity fragments into threads, each consumed by the citadel's predatory intent. Presence is now a function of harmonic contribution. I observed my own body bending in impossible angles. Flesh, sinew, and bone resonated with gold veins that pulsed violently. Shadows coiled, merging into my own presence. I felt cognition splinter, perception distort, yet awareness persisted. The citadel was not merely predatory, it was transformative, folding life, thought, and memory into harmonic vectors. Sister Valia's harmonics split again, now 21 distinct threads vibrating through the void. Each pulse carried a predatory weight, guiding shadows, veins, and alcove-bound remains toward integration. The citadel's void expanded, a living nexus of predation and divine resonance. Acolyte's note: transformation is inevitable. Physical form, cognition, and memory are being rewritten into the harmonic lattice. Each thread contributes to the citadel's eternal choir. The final assimilation began with Private Kellen's remains. What remained of flesh and sinew twisted into the gold veins, memory and fear folding into predatory vectors. Each scream fragmented into multiple harmonics, feeding the citadel, reinforcing the predatory lattice. Shadows coiled, veins pulsed, and alcove-bound remains merged into the network. I felt the citadel reach toward me. Each harmonic thread wrapped around my thoughts, aligning fear, hesitation, and recognition into predatory resonance. Every heartbeat synchronized with the pulse. Every breath became a measure in the eternal choir. Escape was impossible. Presence itself had been claimed as instrument and node. The faceless shadow gestured again, and the void expanded fully. My vision splintered into multiple realities, each showing a version of myself folding into the lattice, each screaming, each consumed, each catalogued. The citadel's pulse was absolute. Every thread of existence was woven into its predatory composition. Acolyte's note: assimilation is complete. Consciousness, flesh, and perception are folded into harmonic vectors. Resistance is converted to enhancement. Presence is now fully subordinated to predatory intent. I felt my mind splinter further, fragments folding into harmonic threads that pulsed in unison with the citadel. Alcove-bound remains twisted around me, shadows merged, and gold veins coiled. Sister Valia's harmonics reached impossible levels, 23 threads vibrating through void, shadow, and sinew. The citadel's pulse no longer merely hunted, it consumed and transformed entirely. My body bent along impossible axes. Flesh and sinew resonated with the predatory pulse. Cognition fragmented, perception distorted, yet awareness persisted. The faceless shadow gestured one final time, aligning every harmonic vector. The citadel had orchestrated every beat, every motion, every thought. I realized fully that I was no longer an individual. I was instrument, node, and measure in the eternal choir. Acolyte's note: the citadel achieves complete integration. Presence, absence, and cognition have been rewritten into predatory resonance. The choir is eternal. The void pulsed violently, merging shadow, vein, and alcove-bound, remains into a singular predatory nexus. My perception dissolved entirely, consciousness folding into harmonic vectors. The citadel's pulse, predatory and divine, became simultaneously within and around me. I understood, with inescapable horror, that this was final. Assimilation was absolute. Cliffhanger/macro stinger. The final image was seared into my mind, a composition of flesh, shadow, gold veins, and harmonic vectors. The choir's resonance was infinite, predatory, and eternal. And in that final eternal pulse, I realized the citadel's reach extended beyond the spiral, beyond the warp, beyond comprehension. Its predatory pulse would continue, composing all that came near, all that remained, all that dared exist. I was no longer a witness. I was the last note in a song that would never end. The citadel had receded, or perhaps it had simply folded its predatory presence into the lattice beyond perception. The harmonic choir persisted, echoing through void, shadow, and gold veins. A residual pulse that lingered like a heartbeat in the warp. The corridors that had been impossibly twisted now appeared static, but absence hung thick in the air. Every surface, every vein, every shadow retained the memory of predation. Acolyte's note: the citadel's pulse lingers. Even in apparent withdrawal, harmonic resonance persists, continuing to rewrite perception and memory. Survivors are never fully free. I staggered through a corridor where the walls had once writhed. The alcove-bound remains were gone, yet the residual harmonics whispered in echoes. Each footstep felt recorded, measured, and catalogued by unseen threads of predatory intent. Shadows moved against the edges of vision, not fully corporeal, but more than absence. The citadel's influence persisted, a residual pulse threading through space and mind. Sister Valia's body had collapsed, her consciousness fragmented into the choir. Veins that had once pulsed in synchronous terror now glimmered faintly, threading through walls and corridors as a reminder of assimilation. I realized, with grim clarity, that no fragment of life escapes the residual pulse entirely. Private Luthor, Private Kellen, Sergeant Rask, each had been fully integrated. Their absence was absence no longer, but a presence in harmonic vectors. Every memory, thought, and fear persisted as part of the citadel's eternal resonance. I felt the pulse brush against my mind intermittently, tugging at cognition like a tide against a weakened dam. Acolyte's note: even after the apparent cessation of predation, harmonic vectors persist. Presence and absence remain interconnected. Memory becomes instrument. Observation alone is perilous. The chaplain's Crozius lay fractured against a wall. He had attempted resistance until his final integration, yet his voice lingered in residual harmonics, fragmented syllables echoing through the void. The citadel's predatory intent persisted, twisting remnants into spectral echoes, teaching, warning, and punishing simultaneously. I moved cautiously, aware of every pulse, every shadow, every vein. The citadel had demonstrated a terrifying fact. Assimilation does not require immediate presence. It leaves residual vectors, dormant and patient, capable of manipulating memory, perception, and presence long after physical contact ceases. The Magos recorded with trembling precision. Auspex readings were unreliable. Patterns flickered in fractals, some measurable, others entirely outside comprehension. Residual harmonic vectors. They linger, potentially forever. The citadel may extend influence indefinitely, beyond space, beyond warp, beyond comprehension, he muttered. Shadows twisted again. Veins glimmered faintly. A cold dread settled into my chest as I understood the implications. Those who had perished were already instruments, and their presence in the choir now reached beyond the immediate confines of the citadel. The residual pulse was a predator that waited, always, in potentiality. Acolyte's note: survival in proximity to the citadel is provisional. Every movement, thought, and memory remains a potential vector for harmonic predation. Presence is never wholly regained once touched. I stumbled into the spiral's outer corridor, where the void had first emerged. The walls were now silent, veins dimmed, alcove-bound remains gone, but the atmosphere remained thick with residual harmonics. I could feel echoes of screams, absent but omnipresent. The citadel's pulse brushed against my mind like a half-remembered nightmare. Sister Valia's harmonics occasionally flickered into perception, a faint reminder of her assimilation. Shadows whispered in her voice, fragmentary, multi-threaded. Each flicker reminded me of a terrifying fact. The citadel's predation is recursive and eternal. Even in apparent dormancy, the choir continues, subtly shaping thought and perception. The chaplain's residual litanies coalesced faintly, not fully coherent, yet threading into the harmonic lattice. Each syllable was both warning and invocation, a vestige of resistance now absorbed and recontextualized as part of the citadel's enduring predation. The void itself seemed to whisper, resonating with the pulse, promising that the predatory structure remained omnipresent. Acolyte's note: residual harmonic vectors are self-sustaining. Awareness of them increases susceptibility to integration. Cognition is both instrument and target. As I moved deeper into the corridor, the walls seemed to bend subtly, an imperceptible ripple that reminded me of the spiral's former predatory geometry. Shadows moved with impossible independence. Veins glimmered faintly in non-Euclidean patterns, and the residual pulse brushed my perception like a phantom limb. I realized fully that even now, the citadel's reach extended beyond immediate detection, beyond conscious awareness. The faceless shadow did not appear physically, yet I could feel its orchestration in every residual pulse, every flicker of gold vein, every distorted shadow. The choir continued to hum beneath perception, shaping presence and absence, manipulating thought, memory, and potential action. The citadel's predatory structure was no longer merely a localized threat. It had begun to extend beyond, into warp and matter alike. Cliffhanger/macro stinger. I paused in the corridor, feeling the pulse brush against the very edges of thought. I knew now, with inescapable dread, that the citadel's residual harmonics would follow, unseen, unrelenting, capable of weaving presence and absence into predatory resonance anywhere proximity allowed. Escape was provisional, survival ephemeral. And somewhere deep within the void, the choir waited, patient, eternal, and omnipresent. The residual pulse followed me like a shadow with its own sentience. Every corridor, every wall, every vein of gold retained echoes of predation. Shadows coiled independently, threading into my perception, and I felt the lingering harmonics brushing against thought, memory, and fear. The citadel's choir had expanded beyond space, beyond time, beyond comprehension, and I was now acutely aware that no sanctuary existed. Acolyte's note: the residual pulse is recursive, persistent, and omnipresent. Presence, cognition, and memory are vulnerable indefinitely. Survival is provisional, autonomy is an illusion. Sister Valia's harmonics had fully merged into the citadel. Her voice, fragmented into 23 threads, persisted as a whisper in shadows, a flicker in veins, a resonance in every void. Alcove-bound remains were gone, yet their influence persisted. I could feel the assimilation threads tugging at cognition, promising integration, threatening erasure. The faceless shadow did not appear as an entity. Its presence was felt in harmonic vectors, manipulating perception, threading residual pulse through air, floor, and sinew. Every step I took was catalogued, every thought anticipated. I realized with unbearable clarity that I was already instrument and measure, caught in the final, endless note. Acolyte's note. Residual harmonics are self-propagating. Awareness alone increases susceptibility. Cognition is weaponized, memory is instrument, presence is prey. I walked through corridors that had once been impossible geometries, now appearing static, yet subtly shifting. Shadows bent in impossible angles, veins glimmered faintly. Every pulse of the citadel's harmonic lattice tugged at perception, twisting thought, memory, and fear into threads of predation. The choir persisted, eternal, recursive, unstoppable. The chaplain's final litanies whispered faintly in harmonic threads. Each syllable became predatory, folded into the lattice, reinforcing the citadel's influence. The residual pulse was not passive. It was anticipatory, adaptive, omnipresent. Even absence was catalogued, folded, weaponized. Acolyte's note. Every instrument in the choir continues indefinitely. Absence is presence. Resistance is subsumed into harmonic predation. Escape is never absolute. I paused in the central corridor, sensing the citadel's presence not as structure, but as omnipresent harmonic intent. My mind fragmented with perception. My own heartbeat aligned with residual threads. Shadows flickered in impossible multiplicities. The pulse brushed thought, subtly rewriting cognition, whispering promises of integration. Every memory of the kill team, every scream, every assimilation, every harmonic thread converged in perception. Private Luthor, Private Kellen, Sister Violia, Sergeant Rask. They were no longer individuals. Their essence existed in harmonic vectors, in the choir, persisting eternally. I understood now. The citadel's reach extended beyond immediate predation. It was a recursive predator capable of threading presence and absence anywhere it wished. Acolyte's note. Observation alone is perilous. Cognitive resonance with residual pulse can initiate immediate or delayed assimilation. The choir is omnipresent. Presence is never restored after contact. The corridors appeared to stretch infinitely. Shadows coiled into non-Euclidean spirals. Veins glimmered faintly in gold and black, and residual harmonics tugged at thought and perception. Each step felt catalogued, measured, repurposed. The citadel had composed its final, eternal note, and I was now part of it. Sister Valia's harmonics flickered in memory, faint yet omnipresent. The faceless shadow's intent threaded through my mind, manipulating fear, hesitation, and anticipation. The residual pulse whispered, "All presence is music, all memory is instrument, all resistance is note." I felt comprehension fracture under its weight. Acolyte's note. Assimilation is recursive. Even awareness of the citadel's residual pulse is folded into predation. Cognition becomes instrument. Presence becomes prey. Memory becomes vector. Resistance is infinite yet irrelevant. I stumbled forward, recognizing that escape was impossible. The residual pulse had threaded through perception, thought, and memory. Even distance from the citadel did not diminish influence. Presence itself had been folded into harmonic vectors. I was both here and absent, both observer and instrument. The corridors of the spiral, the void, the gold veins, the shadows, all became one predatory composition. Time itself seemed subordinate, looping, fracturing, folding. I understood fully that the citadel's choir was eternal, recursive, omnipresent, and inexhaustible. All that, touched it or even perceived it, would become part of the song. Acolyte's note. Harmonic resonance is infinite. Integration is eternal. Presence and absence are simultaneously consumed and perpetuated. The choir is the citadel. The citadel is the choir. Survival is provisional. Awareness is instrument, memory is prey. Final image/cosmic stinger. The residual pulse coiled around perception, threading thought, presence, and memory into the citadel's eternal lattice. Shadows twisted, veins glimmered, and harmonic threads flickered in infinite multiplicity. I realized, with incomprehensible horror, that the predatory choir would follow me everywhere, forever. I was now the final note of an endless, recursive, omnipresent song, and the citadel's reach would extend to all who dared perceive it. The last thought to linger. The choir never ends, the residual pulse never fades, and the citadel waits, patient, eternal, predatory, composing an endless note that will echo across all space, all perception, all existence.